Single dad janitor was laughed at. "Translate this and my salary is yours." His reply stunned them. "Translate this and my salary is yours." The sentence rang out like a slap, sharp and unexpected, slicing through the polished stillness of the top, floorboard room at Bionova. Miguel Alvarez froze behind his mop handle. From where he stood in the shadow of the glass partition, he saw her. Veronica Leang, CEO of Bionova, dressed in a black silk blouse and tailored gray slacks, holding a thick document like it was a prop in a comedy sketch. She waved it with a smirk. "Seriously, not even our lead counsel could make sense of it. It's all in German technical patent language. Legal meets science. Translate this, and I'll write you a check for my salary this quarter." A burst of laughter erupted from the three men seated around the marble conference table. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone whistled low and said, "That's $400,000, Veronica. You sure you want to lose that over a joke?" She tilted her head. "I'm not worried. There's no one in this building who can translate it." Miguel glanced down at the floor, his mop gliding silently across the hardwood. He didn't need to see the document. He'd seen 100 like it. The structure of technical German was burned into his brain like the lyrics of a song he once loved and now tried not to sing. He kept moving. "Make sure the janitorial team doesn't toss this one," Veronica added with a wink, tossing the document onto a side table near the coffee bar. "It might be worth something eventually." Miguel didn't look at her. He had perfected the art of invisibility, but his hand gripping the mop handle had gone white. He pushed the cart past the edge of the room and rounded the corner into the hallway. Only when the door closed behind him, muffling the laughter, did he stop. His breath came slowly, evenly. He reached for the cloth in his back pocket and wiped his hands. Then, with one quick glance to make sure the hallway was empty, he turned back, walked quietly into the boardroom, and picked up the document. Downstairs, in the janitor's locker room, the fluorescent lights hummed above him as Miguel sat alone on the bench. The document was open in his lap. His eyes scanned each page, handwritten notes in the margins, diagrams of biochemical sequences, obscure, references to EU data security regulations. It was worse than he thought. A clause on page 3 granted the German partner unrestricted back-end access to Bionova's client genome database, a direct violation of HIP. Another section effectively surrendered the intellectual property rights of any co-developed genetic mapping software. He exhaled through his nose. "They didn't read this," he muttered. "They couldn't have." He ran a calloused thumb over the Bionova logo in the corner. It had been 10 years since he last translated a document like this. 10 years since he'd left the lecture halls and abandoned his name on academic journals to become a ghost in a navy blue uniform. Footsteps echoed outside the locker room. Miguel folded the contract, slid it into his backpack, and stood. He had one more floor to clean. It was 2:15 a.m. when he stepped into his apartment in Little Village, a working-class neighborhood west of downtown Chicago. His daughter Camila was asleep on the pull-out couch, one arm dangling off the edge, her sketchbook open beside her. Miguel paused to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. In the dim glow of the kitchen light, he brewed coffee, sat at the chipped Formica table, and pulled out his old laptop, the one he hadn't touched since he left his job at the University of Texas. The startup chime felt like a memory. He dug through a drawer and retrieved a cracked leather notebook, his old lexicon journal. Inside were notes he'd taken on dialect shifts, patent language, EU compliance terms written in 3 languages. And then, quietly, with the city asleep outside his window, Miguel began to translate. The next morning, Bionova gleamed in the daylight. Every glass surface polished, every hallway silent in its early-hour tranquility. Miguel placed a sealed envelope into the company's internal document drop labeled Legal, Confidential. No signature, no note, just a clean typed translation and a 1-page summary of the legal implications. As he walked past the reception desk, Veronica Leang stepped out of an elevator flanked by 2 legal advisors. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor. Her eyes swept the lobby and landed on him. There was the slightest flicker of recognition, then dismissal, as if he was just background, noise, a fixture. Miguel dipped his head respectfully. She didn't acknowledge him, and that was fine. He wasn't doing it for her. That evening, as he walked Camilla home from school, she skipped beside him, her backpack bouncing. "Dad," she asked suddenly, "do you ever wish you were still a teacher?" Miguel smiled. "I was never just a teacher, mija. I was your mom's husband, and now I'm your dad. That's more than enough." Camilla wrinkled her nose. "But you're really smart," he chuckled. "Being smart doesn't mean I have to stand in front of a class. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is know when to be quiet and when not to." She tilted, her head. "Is that one of your old professor sayings?" Miguel stopped walking. He looked at her seriously. "No, that's a janitor saying, and for the first time in a long time, he meant it." The bus hissed to a stop in front of Camilla's school, and Miguel stepped down into the brisk morning air, clutching the brown paper bag with her lunch, and a small surprise, a second-hand set of watercolor pencils she'd been eyeing through the bookstore window last weekend. He adjusted the collar of his jacket. The city was waking up, horns blaring, tires rolling across wet pavement, voices rising on sidewalks. It all sounded distant to Miguel. His mind was still in the pages of the document he had translated overnight, the clauses that kept replaying like a warning bell in his chest. Inside the school, children ran down the hallway. Camilla stood at her locker, pushing her hair behind, her ear surrounded by a cluster of classmates. Miguel slowed, catching sight of her face, just as one of the boys laughed and said too loudly, "That's Camilla! Her dad's the janitor at Bionova. Betty cleans toilets with a dictionary. A few kids," chuckled. Miguel's hand tightened around the paper bag. Camilla's eyes darted toward him. She didn't cry, didn't even flinch. Instead, she turned to the boy and said calmly, clearly, "My dad speaks 5 languages. How many do you speak when you're not? Hiding behind your mom?" Silence. The boy blinked. The others shuffled. Miguel stepped forward just in time to hear a teacher calling the kids into class. Camilla turned back to her locker, her expression unreadable. He crouched beside her. "I brought your lunch," he said, placing the bag gently in her hands. "And something extra." Camilla opened the top. When she saw the pencils, her eyes widened. "Just a little." "You remembered?" "Of course," Miguel smiled. "You're my favorite artist." She looked down, then asked quietly, "Why didn't you tell them what you used to do?" "Because it's not about what I used to do, Misha. It's about who I still am." He straightened up. "And today, I'm the guy who's late for his second job." Camilla smiled just faintly. "Thanks, Dad." Later that evening, Miguel stood behind the stove, in their small kitchen, stirring a pot of lentil soup. The sound of Camilla's pencil scratching against paper filled the room. She was drawing again. It had been weeks since she'd touched her sketchbook. Miguel leaned against the counter, letting the scent of cumin and garlic settle around him like memory. He thought of Sophia, his late wife, and the way she used to hum while chopping vegetables. She had been the dreamer, the artist, the spark in their tiny apartment in Austin. When she passed 11 years ago, something in Miguel broke not in rage, but in silence. Like a page ripped from a book no one would ever finish reading. He had walked away from everything, his lectures, his research, his pending promotion. His students called him Dr. Alvarez. Now even his name had faded into the mop water, but he never regretted it. Not when he tucked Camilla in each night. Not when she whispered in her sleep, clinging to his hand. Still tonight after the document, after that line, "Translate this and my salary is yours." The weight of it pressed harder than usual. He served the soup, then sat across from Camilla. She dipped a spoon into her bowl, then looked up. "You okay?" Miguel chuckled softly. "You've been watching me since you were 3. Of course you know. I heard what Ms. Tam said on the phone. She admitted something about a contract. He paused. It's complicated. Camilla nodded. You don't have to tell me, but if it's like a good complicated, then I'm glad. Miguel studied her, this child who had inherited her mother's sharp eyes and his quiet heart. Then he said, Have I ever told you why I stopped teaching? Camilla shook her head. It wasn't because I got tired of it. I loved it. The books, the languages, the students. Then why he stirred his soup. Because when your mom got sick, I realized something. Being the smartest man in the room means nothing if the people you love are hurting and you're not there, so I chose to be there. Camilla was quiet. Miguel continued, voice low. Some days I miss it. The work, the lectures, the whiteboard full of words only 3 people in the building could understand. A pause. But you're worth every word I never got to say. Later that night, Miguel sat at the kitchen table, the translation now sealed in an envelope, ready to drop into the legal department's anonymous box at Bionova. He reached for his journal again, not the one with linguistic notes, but a different one he started after Sophia died, a personal one. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, March 12th, translated the document. 30 pages, 28,000 words, 1 clause that could have destroyed the company. They laughed. I listened. Tomorrow I'll return to being invisible. But tonight, I remembered who I used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. He closed the journal. The apartment was silent. Camilla had fallen asleep on the couch again, curled beside her drawing. Miguel stood and turned off the lights. But before he did, he looked once more at the envelope on the counter, then whispered to the darkness, Let's see if they're still laughing tomorrow. At 5:53 a.m., the city of Chicago was still dressed, in shadows, the skyline dimmed by the last breath of night. Miguel stood beneath the soft glow of Bionova's glass atrium envelope in hand. The marble floor beneath his shoes was spotless. He'd cleaned it himself 100 times, but this morning it felt like unfamiliar ground. He hesitated at the internal document drop labeled Legal, Confidential, then slid the envelope through the slot. It landed with a soft thud, swallowed by bureaucracy. No signature, no name, just his words and the truth. He exhaled. Back to work, he whispered. Upstairs, floor 42 buzzed with early tension. Veronica Leang stepped into the executive boardroom at 7:08 a.m., a black coffee in one hand, tablet in the other, heels clicking like punctuation marks on polished wood. The document was already on the table, neatly translated, thoroughly annotated. Beside it, a 1-page executive summary, clear, concise, damning. She stared at it for a long moment. The boardroom was empty except for Derek Lang, head of legal affairs, who had called her as soon as he found the envelope. You're saying this came in anonymously? She asked. Lang nodded. No ID, no submission code. Just this. He slid the summary closer to her. Veronica read silently, her expression unreadable, until she reached the clause Miguel had marked with red underline. Full technical access to genomic sequence data from all North American clients. She looked up sharply. You're telling me we almost signed away unrestricted access to our entire database? Lang pressed his lips together. Yes. And the clause was buried in dense language. Our team flagged it, but this version, it's surgical. Veronica tapped the page with her fingernail. This isn't AI translated. This is human work, deep understanding. Whoever did this knows not only the language, but the stakes. Lang hesitated. Should we try to trace who she cut him off with a shake of her head? No, not yet. By 8:30, word had started to spread. In the internal legal Slack channel, someone typed, Has anyone seen the translation that came in this morning? It's a masterpiece. Saved us from walking into a lawsuit. Another replied, Honestly, this is above our pay grade. I ran it through 2 cross-checks. No errors. Whoever did this knows more about German biotech law than half our senior team. At 9:02, Miguel was scrubbing the base of a window wall in the ground floor lounge when the assistant building manager stopped him. "Hey, Miguel, you were working last night, right?" He stood cautious. "Yeah. Why?" "There was a document left in legal confidential one. Some people are looking into it. Thought maybe you saw someone." Miguel shook his head. "Just empty halls and old gum on the carpet. Nothing new." The manager chuckled. "Yeah, figured. All good. Thanks, man." Miguel went back to scrubbing, heart quiet, but steady. He didn't want thanks. He wanted impact. That evening, back home, Camila sat at the kitchen table painting a fox in a watercolor forest. Miguel watched her, then turned his eyes to the city outside their window, alive with sirens, headlights, and the pulse of millions. "You okay, Dad?" Camila asked, not looking up. He nodded. "Just thinking." She blew gently on her painting. "About the contract?" Miguel smiled faintly. "How do you always know you get quiet when you do something brave? Not nervous quiet, brave quiet." He paused, caught off guard by her phrasing. Brave quiet. She nodded. "Like right before you helped me tell the teacher I wanted to switch art. Classes, you didn't say much, but you held my hand and it made me feel strong." Miguel's throat tightened. "You get quiet when you do something brave." He hadn't realized it showed. Meanwhile, on floor 42, Veronica Leang sat alone in her office, watching the sun bleed orange into the glass horizon. She clicked through files. On her screen, all labeled Munich Agreement, German draft. The deeper she read, the clearer it became. If they had signed that version, Bionova would have forfeited more than intellectual property. They would have been open to regulatory violations, lawsuits, and public backlash for years. Someone had saved them silently, completely, without taking credit. She remembered the janitor walking past that morning, the one with the quiet eyes, the one who never spoke unless spoken to. Could it be? She pushed the thought away. Too far-fetched. But something wouldn't let it go. At 10:43 p.m., Miguel was finishing his rounds. The halls were still empty coffee cups, forgotten. Conference room chairs, half-open blinds, the quiet remains of another corporate day. He paused by the same table where Veronica had tossed the German document the night before. The champagne glasses were gone, the laughter silenced, the contract gone too, but not forgotten. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his leather notebook. Flipping to the last page, he wrote, "They laughed." But the truth didn't care who laughed. It only needed someone willing to say it. He closed the notebook, turned off the lights, and walked on. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature, but in the way everyone sat a little straighter, talked a little quieter, glanced around as though someone else might say what they were thinking first. The early spring sunlight cast sharp lines across the table, dividing power from panic. Veronica Leang stood at the head of the table, fingers lightly resting on the armrest of her leather chair. "I want to make this very clear," she said, her voice controlled but firm. "Had we signed that agreement yesterday, we would have violated 3 federal statutes and handed over proprietary technology worth hundreds of millions." A hush settled. The CFO, Gordon Hale, cleared his throat. "So, who caught it?" "Our in-house team flagged a few issues, but this level of detail, it's surgical." Veronica paused. She didn't want to answer that question because she didn't know. "I don't have a name," she replied. "The translation was submitted anonymously, but whoever they are, they understand legal German-European data law and the genomic implications better than half the consultants we've hired." The room murmured. Then from the corner, Derek Lang spoke slowly. "You think we have someone on payroll? Who's just hiding?" Veronica's gaze narrowed. "I don't think they're hiding. I think we just never thought to look." Downstairs, Miguel was mopping the entrance to the south lobby, eyes focused, movements precise. He didn't need to look up to know who had entered. He felt it in the hush that followed her heels. The pause of security glancing up the subtle change in air pressure as people cleared her path. Veronica Leang. He didn't flinch, just finished the floor he was working on, wrung the mop out carefully and pushed the cart toward the janitor's closet. Miguel, right? He turned. It was the first time she'd ever said his name. Yes, ma'am. I was hoping I could speak to you for a moment. He nodded, his face neutral. Of course. Do you mind if I put this away first? Not at all. Inside the supply room. Amid the scent of pine cleaner and warm plastic, Miguel set the mop back on its hook, wiped his hands on a towel, and followed her out. They walked in silence through a quiet hallway until they reached the small break area behind the executive wing. No one else was around. Veronica turned to him. Did you submit the translation? Miguel didn't answer right away. He looked at her not with defiance, not with shame, but with a calm that felt like standing in the eye of a storm. I did. She folded her arms. Why anonymously? Because I didn't want credit, he replied. I wanted protection for you, for the company, for the people who depend on it, including me. Veronica studied him. You could have asked for anything. A raise, a job, recognition. He tilted his head slightly. That's not why I did it. Then why? Miguel's eyes didn't waver. Because silence would have been betrayal. And I've betrayed enough of myself already. That stopped her. She softened just a little. You're not just a janitor, are you? I am now, he said, but not always. Where did you learn German like that? That wasn't textbook translation. That was life, he interrupted gently. And loss. And a little bit of academia once. Veronica stepped back, crossing her arms. Do you know what you saved us from? Miguel nodded. Yes, and it's not over. Her brows furrowed. The clause was a trap, he continued. Not just technical, it was designed to look legitimate to pass through legal and compliance without raising red flags. It wasn't just carelessness. It was strategic. Veronica's expression turned ice cold. Are you saying someone inside? I'm saying someone either didn't read it or didn't care to. A beat, then another. Veronica took a breath, composed, but clearly shaken. I should have seen it. Miguel offered a half smile. You saw what they let you see. People like me. We see what gets left behind. She looked at him then, not through him, not past him, at him. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who tells the truth with no need to be heard? Miguel glanced away. That's what happens when you've spent a decade cleaning up after people who never asked your name. Veronica didn't speak, but something in her shifted. Later that day at Bionova's legal department, 3 compliance officers reviewed the flagged clauses again. The language buried in technical terms had required a mastery of both German contract law and biotech regulation to spot. They were stunned. He must have had training, or he's gifted, or both. Meanwhile, in the janitor's lounge, Miguel changed into his street clothes. He pulled out his phone, saw a message from Camila. How was your day? Mine was better. Art class was fun again. Love you. He smiled and typed back. Good. Quiet. Like the kind that matters. Then he sat down on the worn bench, pulled out his leather journal, and added one sentence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is whisper truth into a room full of noise. Miguel, wait! The words echoed across the lobby like a command meant for a soldier, not a janitor. Miguel turned slowly, mop bucket still in one hand, the other wrapped loosely around a damp rag. Veronica Leang stood near the elevator heels, silent now against the marble, her expression unreadable, equal parts precision and something else. Vulnerability. She walked toward him, not with her usual clipped stride, but measured steps. Intentional. I need to speak with you now. Miguel glanced at the security guard by the desk, then back to her. Of course, Miss Leang Veronica, she corrected. That was new. She led him into a small side conference room. It smelled of whiteboard ink and lemon-scented cleaner. His scent, he realized with a trace of irony. She closed the door behind them, arms crossed. I don't want the press to find out about what nearly happened with the German deal, she said, but I also don't want it buried. What you did, what you saw means we have a much bigger problem. Miguel nodded. I agree. Veronica tilted her head slightly. So tell me, how does a janitor quiet off the grid no LinkedIn presence manage to outthink an entire department of contract attorneys and technical translators? Miguel didn't blink. Because I wasn't always a janitor, she folded her arms. I figured that much. I taught linguistics and contract interpretation at the University of Texas, specialized in multilingual risk language, particularly in biotech. My wife got sick. I stepped away, and I never went back. Veronica leaned against the table. What stopped you, Grief? He said plainly, and the cost of starting over when your world burns down. The room went quiet. Then softly she asked, and now Miguel met her eyes. Now I mop your boardrooms. And apparently I save your company. A silence stretched. Then she walked closer, studying him. You could have asked for anything. A promotion, a job title, money. Why just drop the translation and disappear? He gave her a sad smile. I wasn't looking to be found. Veronica crossed her arms again. I think it's time you were. The following morning, Miguel was summoned officially, this time to the 43rd floor. He'd never been up there. It was the executive-level, clean marble original art on the walls and air that smelled like eucalyptus and wealth. He sat across from 3 people, Veronica Leang from legal, and Gordon Hale, the CFO. No one offered him coffee, but no one dismissed him either. We believe someone inside leaked an early draft of the contract to our German partners, Derek began. Someone who wanted those clauses in there. Miguel nodded. I suspected as much, Gordon interjected. Do you have proof? No, Miguel replied. But I can show you which parts were written to look benign. They weren't machine translated. They were curated, handcrafted even. He pointed to a printout of the document. This term, dot and Gavinray, doesn't exist in normal contracts. It's legal camouflage. Veronica leaned forward. And how did you catch it? Miguel looked at her steady. Because people who are forgotten tend to read more carefully. That line landed hard. Derek sat back, whistling low. I think we've underestimated our janitor. Veronica didn't smile. She simply said, no. We've misjudged our company. That afternoon, as Miguel was preparing to leave, he found Veronica waiting near the south exit. No entourage, no clipboard, just her standing in the same wind that tousled his collar. I owe you something, she said. Miguel shook his head. You owe me nothing. No, she insisted, her voice firmer now. You owe yourself something. A chance to stop being invisible. He tilted his head, thoughtful. Visibility is a luxury when you have something to lose. Veronica stepped closer. So, what do you want, Miguel? Really? He didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, I want my daughter to grow up knowing that telling the truth doesn't require a stage, just the courage to whisper. Her expression changed. Softer, almost maternal. You want to protect your daughter, she said. I always have, he replied. Then let me help, she offered. We're building a new division, international compliance, cross-border language audits. It needs someone with your skill set. I told you, Miguel replied. I'm not looking to be found. No, Veronica said, but maybe it's time to stop hiding. That night, Miguel sat at the kitchen table while Camilla finished her homework beside him. The apartment was warm with the smell of leftover rice and fried plantains. "Hey, Dad," she asked without looking up. "Yeah, mija." "If someone gave you a new nameplate for your job, but it had your old title, the one you used to be proud of, would you use it?" Miguel looked at her. "Where'd that come from?" She shrugged. "Nowhere. Just wondering." He paused, then said, "Only if I believed I still deserved it." Camilla looked at him thoughtful. "Then I think you do." And just like that, something shifted in Miguel's chest. Not pride, not ego, recognition, and maybe readiness. Miguel had never been in the head office conference room with the lights on. Usually he was there when the city slept, wiping down the glossy surface of the 12-oot mahogany table, collecting the quiet remains of corporate strategy, cold coffee forgotten pens, a scribbled post-it here and there. But this morning, the lights were bright, the air tense, and every seat at the table was taken. Veronica sat at the head, her gaze fixed on the screen behind her, where the document Miguel had translated was projected. Next to her, Derek Lang clicked through the annotated clauses line by line, exposing the trap hidden in the contract like rot beneath marble. And across the room sat Eric Shaw, Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. Clean suit, confident smile, too confident. "We're not accusing anyone," Derek began, "but the early draft submitted to our German partners included terms that were never cleared by legal or reviewed by the board." Eric's smile didn't falter. "Mistakes happen. We were moving fast. It was a celebratory draft, not final." Veronica didn't blink. "You sent a draft that gave our partner full access to client, genomic data, and shared IP rights. That's not a typo, that's intent." Eric leaned back in his chair. "And where's the proof? This entire investigation is based on the word of an anonymous translator." Miguel, seated at the far end of the table, raised his hand. Veronica nodded. "Go ahead. I wasn't anonymous because I was hiding," he said calmly. "I was anonymous because I didn't trust that the truth would be enough. But I trust it now." Eric turned toward him, smirked. "And you are?" Miguel stood. "The man who used to teach this language before your legal team forgot how to read." The room went silent. Miguel walked to the screen and pointed. "This term, dot and rücken recht. It's not standard. It's not even common in German law. It's fabricated legally a smokescreen. Whoever wrote it knew we'd miss it unless someone wanted it in." He turned to Eric. "And based on your email metadata, it came from your machine." Eric's smile cracked just slightly. Veronica folded her hands. "We've already sent everything to our compliance division. If they confirm this was deliberate, the board will vote on your removal." Eric opened his mouth, then shut it. Later that afternoon, Veronica found Miguel in the break room staring out the window with a cup of black coffee in his hand. "No sugar?" she asked. He smiled without turning. "I saved the sweetness for better days." She leaned against the counter. That was impressive. "I wasn't trying to be impressive," Miguel replied. "I was trying to be heard." Veronica looked at him. "You were, and people are finally listening." A pause. Then she asked gently, "Why didn't you stay in the academic world? You clearly had everything." Miguel stirred his coffee. "I had a wife who was sick, and a baby who needed a father more than a degree. I walked away because the world I built on words couldn't save the people I loved most." Veronica's voice softened. "I'm sorry." He finally looked at her. "You don't need to be. I chose what mattered. I still do." She studied him for a moment. "You know, we promote people for far less than what you just did." "I'm not looking for promotion," he said. "Just peace. But don't you want to do more?" Miguel set the cup down gently. "More isn't always louder. Sometimes the biggest difference is made by the one no one expects." That night, Miguel walked Camila home from her after-school art class. She had a charcoal sketch tucked under her arm, and her ponytail swayed with each step. Miss Tam said, "You're famous now," she teased. "Apparently, there's a rumor you saved your company from a billion-dollar mistake." Miguel smiled. That's an exaggeration, but not a lie. He paused. No, not a lie. Camilla grinned. "Did you get a cape or a shiny badge?" He laughed. "No cape, just more paperwork." They crossed a quiet intersection. Camilla looked up. "You know, I told the mean kids in my class that my dad used to speak 5 languages and they laughed." Miguel looked down. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be. I told them that 1 language is enough if you speak with heart." He stopped walking. That line, it hit harder than anything in a contract. "You said that?" She nodded. He took her hand. "Then I guess the best thing I ever translated was into you." Later that night, Miguel sat by the window as the city lights blinked like distant stars. He opened his leather journal again and wrote, "The real cost of being invisible is forgetting your own name, but the gift is remembering that value doesn't need volume." He closed the book, turned off the lamp, and whispered to himself, "You're not gone, you're just becoming." The elevator chimed on floor 43 with the cold finality of a courtroom bell. Miguel stepped out slowly, feeling like a man, summoned not to be questioned but to answer for something sacred. He wore the same dark blue uniform he always did. No blazer, no pressed shirt, no silk tie. Just Miguel Alvarez, janitor, father, former linguist, standing at the edge of a battlefield that few would ever see. The room before him was filled with the top brass of Bionova legal heads, compliance officers. Cybersecurity leads Veronica Leang, seated at the helm, flanked by 2 board members flown in overnight. On the screen behind her glowed the latest forensic analysis document, metadata, timestamps, IP logs, a digital map of trust shattered. Veronica gestured for Miguel to take a seat. No introduction needed. He sat down, calm and unshaken, though his palms were a quiet storm beneath the table. Derek Lang opened. "We've confirmed the document was edited outside company protocol. The inserted clauses came from a remote device masked through internal credentials. The trail ends at Eric Shaw's home IP." One board member leaned forward. "We've already initiated separation proceedings." "But that still leaves a question." Everyone looked at Miguel. "How did you spot it?" He didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Because when you've spent years scrubbing silence from other people's floors, you learn to hear what isn't being said." A beat of silence followed. Someone scribbled notes. Another nodded slowly. Veronica spoke next, her voice sharper. "We need to rebuild trust internally and with our partners. I want Miguel to oversee the forensic review of all recent contracts. Quietly. I want his eyes on every word, every clause." A murmur. One executive frowned. "He's not credentialed," Miguel replied, before anyone else could. "I'm not asking for your trust," he said plainly. "Only your attention." Veronica leaned forward. "You'll get both." The next few days passed in controlled chaos. Behind the scenes, Miguel worked with a quiet intensity that startled the internal teams. He sat at desks usually reserved for external, consultants marking up contracts with red ink and hand-scrolled annotations. He never asked for lunch breaks, never raised his voice. But when he circled a paragraph, legal teams paid attention. One afternoon, as the legal staff debated a clause in a new biotech collaboration agreement with a firm in Brazil, Miguel walked over and pointed. "This phrasing here do sense it's a misrepresentation. In Brazilian law, it implies a category of personal data that, if mishandled, triggers constitutional penalties. You're using it in a way that invites liability." A silence settled. Then one junior attorney whispered, "He's right. I missed that." Miguel nodded and walked away without comment. The team watched him go. He doesn't talk much, someone muttered. He doesn't have to, another said. His pen talks for him. One evening, long after the sun dipped below the skyline, Miguel found Veronica standing in the glass-walled break room, nursing a half-cup of coffee. She didn't turn when he entered. I used to think being the smartest person in the room meant always having the answer, she said. Now I think it means knowing where to look. Miguel leaned against the counter beside her. Smart fades. Awareness lasts longer. She looked at him finally. You've changed the culture of this company in 2 weeks. I didn't mean to. That's exactly why it matters. He sipped his own coffee, silent. Then Veronica said, You know what shocked me most? Not that you spotted the clause. Not even that you translated it so cleanly. What then? That you could have saved yourself a decade ago and didn't? Miguel didn't flinch. I did save myself, he said quietly, just not in a way that fit someone else's headline. That night, as Miguel arrived home, he found Camilla on the floor with paint smeared across her elbows, her canvas filled with golden hues and long shadows. Your hair's a mess, he teased, stepping over paper towels. I'm experimenting with chaos, she replied without looking up. He sat beside her. How's it going? She glanced sideways, brushing her bangs with the back of her wrist. Miss Tam says my work has emotion now. She asked what changed. Miguel smiled. And what did you say? That my dad started telling the truth out loud again. He swallowed hard. Then she handed him a folded piece of paper. What's this, a contest? Student-parent showcase? They want a written story paired with visual art. I thought maybe we could do it together. Miguel opened the form, scanned the deadline, and smiled. I don't know, Camilla. I haven't written anything that wasn't buried in footnotes in a long time. She grinned. Then maybe it's time someone read what you really think. He looked at her, her hope, her hunger, her faith, and for the first time in years he felt ready to speak with his name attached. Later, alone at the window, Miguel opened his leather journal and wrote, Sometimes the war isn't fought with fists or votes or money. Sometimes it's won when someone finally listens to the one man who never raised his voice. He closed the book, but not the story that was still unfolding. The headline dropped on a Tuesday morning like thunder in a quiet room. Bionova executive resigns amid contract scandal. Internal source prevents billion-dollar breach. The article didn't name Miguel, but the phrasing internal source with linguistic and legal fluency was enough to spark whispers in every corner of the company. For the first time in years, the janitor with the quiet eyes wasn't invisible. He was suspected, and yet no one confronted him directly. No finger-pointing, just nods, glances held too long. Conversations that stopped when he entered the break room. The strange, cautious reverence given not to a hero, but to someone people didn't quite know how to thank. Veronica found him later that day in the archive room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, sifting through old print contracts like they were pieces of an unsolved puzzle. You're not required to do this, she said softly from the doorway. Miguel didn't look up, I know. She walked in heels, quiet against the linoleum, and sat beside him without asking. There's something about ink on paper, he said. It's honest. You can't delete it. You either meant what you wrote or you didn't. Veronica picked up a contract, scanned a line, then looked at him. You know what they're saying about you. Miguel shrugged. I've been the janitor for 11 years. Silence doesn't scare me. She nodded. But visibility does. He paused. It's not the spotlight I fear. It's the shadows that follow. Veronica was quiet a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a check. Miguel opened it and immediately began to shake his head. No, he said firmly. This isn't necessary. It's earned, Veronica replied. Not a bonus, not a reward. You said once, translate this and my salary is yours. I said it as a joke. You answered it with your integrity. So this is me, honoring the line. Miguel looked down at the paper. $400, Susan dollars, more than he'd earned in the last 8 years combined. He blinked once, twice, and then gently folded the check back into its envelope. I don't need charity. Veronica didn't flinch. And this isn't charity. It's accountability. Mine. They sat in silence. Then Veronica added, her voice softer. Now there's more. I'd like to offer you a position. He didn't react. Our international division is being rebuilt. We're moving toward in-house linguistic auditing. No more outsourced guesswork. I want you to lead it. Miguel finally turned to her. You want a janitor with a dead past to head your global compliance? I want the one man in this company who saw the truth before anyone else did. He held her gaze for a long moment, then said, You don't know everything about me. I'm not offering this because I know everything, she replied. I'm offering it because I know enough. That evening, Miguel sat with Camila at their kitchen table. The check rested between them untouched. She stared at it wide-eyed. Dad, this could change everything. He nodded. I know. You could finally get us out of here. Maybe even go back to teaching or write your own books or take that job if you want it. Miguel smiled at her. And what would you do? Camila grinned. I'd buy every color of watercolor they sell at Michael's and maybe one of those sketch tablets with a pen. He chuckled. Big dreams, huh? I learned from the best. Her words warmed him deeper than the soup steaming between them. Then she said more, gently. Why are you hesitating? He looked at her. Because for so long I built my life on staying small. And now that the door's open, I don't know who I am when I walk through it. Camila reached out and touched his hand. You're my dad. That's always been more than enough. The next morning, Miguel met with Veronica on the rooftop terrace of Bionova, a quiet place few employees ever used. The wind tugged at his collar. Her hair danced in the breeze, untamed for once. He handed her the check. I'm not taking this. She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand. Not because it's not fair, it is, but because there's something more valuable you can give me. Veronica's brows lifted. Name it. An offer that doesn't turn me into a poster boy. A job that lets me work in the shadows if I choose. Privacy, purpose, and one more thing. Go on. No more jokes at the expense of the invisible people. Not just me, anyone. Veronica's throat moved as she swallowed. You have my word. Miguel extended his hand. She shook it. No press cameras, no applause, just a quiet pact between two people who'd once stood on opposite sides of a locked door and finally chose to open it. That night, Miguel pulled his old university briefcase out of the closet. It was dusty. Inside, tucked behind a forgotten exam rubric, he found a folded photo of Sophia holding a baby Camila in her arms. He stared at it for a long while. Then, placing the photo gently on his desk, he whispered, I think I'm ready now. And for the first time in over a decade, he meant it. Miguel Alvarez adjusted the sleeves of his gray shirt, still simple, still clean, but no longer part of a uniform. He wasn't mopping floors this morning. He was walking into a room full of people with titles, and for the first time in over a decade, he was the one they waited for. The new workspace on the 37th floor was modest. No gold plaques, no oversized glass desks, just a room with clean lines, natural light, and 2 whiteboards already half filled with terms in 6 languages. At the center sat a long table where language met law. His name wasn't on the door. That was intentional. But the chair at the head of the table, that was his now. Veronica had honored every word of their agreement. No publicity, no press release. The title was Vague Contractor Linguistic Integrity Advisor. But the work was sharp, He reviewed every international contract before it reached executive eyes, not for grammar, for danger. He saved them twice in the first week alone. That afternoon, as Miguel refilled his coffee mug in the executive lounge, he spotted Veronica across the room. She stood alone at the window phone in one hand, unreadable as always. He hesitated, then walked toward her. "I have to admit," he said softly, "this is the quietest promotion I've ever seen." Veronica looked up, a slight smile tugging at the edge of her mouth. "You asked for quiet." He raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask for invisible." She sipped her tea. "You're not invisible anymore." He looked around. "Some days I'm not sure what I am." Veronica turned to him, her voice calm but direct. "You're the man who reminds us that excellence doesn't always wear a title and that silence isn't absence. It's precision." Miguel blinked, then nodded. "That's a good line." "I borrowed it," she replied, "from something you said your first day here." He chuckled. "So now you're quoting me back to myself." Veronica smiled. "Only the best lines." That weekend, Miguel and Camilla sat cross-legged on the living room floor, their backs against the couch. Between them was a giant poster board, watercolor sets, and a tangle of colored pencils. "I still don't know why you want me to be the writing half of this project," Miguel said. Camilla grinned. "Because your stories are better than my dialogue." He pointed at her fox sketch. "And your fox has more emotion than half the characters in corporate boardrooms." She beamed. "So, what should our theme be?" Miguel thought for a moment, then wrote slowly at the top of the page, "What you don't see." Camilla read it aloud. "That's powerful." He looked at her. "It's everything I've ever been." They worked in silence for a while, father and daughter building a story that blended colors and words, shadows and light. Miguel wrote a short passage about a janitor who once taught 5 languages, and a child who taught him how to speak again. Camilla drew a pair of shoes, one small, one large, walking side by side along a cracked sidewalk that bloomed with wildflowers. The following week, Veronica asked Miguel to join her at a quiet lunch spot near the office. No suits, no files, just 2 people and a table between them. She handed him a slim folder. "What's this?" he asked. "An advisory contract. Longer term, fully remote if you want it. Better pay, better hours." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Why me again?" Veronica leaned in, her voice low but steady. "Because in a world full of voices shouting for attention, you listened for what others missed. And then you acted not to be seen, but to protect. That kind of integrity doesn't come with a degree. It comes with character." He didn't answer right away, then said, "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Take your time." But he added only if the first line in the contract reads, "No jokes at the expense of the invisible." Veronica smiled already, added. That night, Camilla finished her project and slid it into a manila folder. As Miguel turned off the kitchen light, she stopped him. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah." She hesitated, then said, "I used to think being small meant being unimportant. But now I think being small just means you fit into places other people don't even notice. And sometimes that's where the real work happens." Miguel looked at her, with eyes full of quiet awe. "You're not just growing," he said, "you're blooming." She laughed. "Well, you're finally watering yourself, too." He smiled, and for the first time, he believed her. Later, as the city exhaled into dusk, Miguel sat by the window with his old leather journal. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote, "Some doors don't need to be kicked open. Some just need a quiet knock and someone brave enough to walk through." He closed the journal. Outside, Camilla taped their art project on the fridge, and in that simple act, a child celebrating a father, Miguel Alvarez, was seen fully and finally for exactly who he had always been. It was raining softly that night. Not the angry kind of rain that lashes windows, but the quiet, thoughtful kind that seems to listen while it falls. Miguel sat on the apartment balcony, legs stretched out, journal open across his knees. Inside, Camilla was watching an old documentary about endangered languages, her latest curiosity. Every so often, he heard her mutter something in Spanish, then repeat it in English, then sketch beside the phrase. He smiled. She had inherited more than his eyes. He ran his fingers over the sentence he had just written. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about what you pass along without needing to be. He paused, then crossed it out. Something still didn't feel full. The knock came around 9:15 p.m. Miguel opened the door to find Veronica standing there. Umbrella folded rain still beating on her coat collar. "You said no surprises," he said, surprised. "I lied," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. He stepped aside. She walked in, eyes scanning the small, warm space filled with Camilla's drawings and the scent of cinnamon tea. Camilla looked up from the couch. Miss Veronica grinned. "Hey, artist, I hear your dad's collaborating with a genius." Camilla blushed and ran to her room, mumbling something about final touches. Miguel raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" Veronica nodded. "Actually, I just came from a board dinner. They asked me to speak about leadership. I started writing a speech. Then I stopped because I realized everything I wanted to say I already heard someone else say better." He folded his arms. "I'm not giving speeches." "I know," she said, "but maybe you've been giving one this whole time just by showing up." They sat at the table. Veronica pulled out her phone and tapped it once. "I recorded something. Not for the board, for me." She hit play. It was Miguel's voice recorded from a training session earlier that week with the compliance team. Language is more than translation. It's trust. It's the promise that what you say I will carry carefully, and what I say you'll hear without distortion. Miguel stared at the phone. "I didn't know you recorded that." "I didn't want to forget it," Veronica said softly. A pause. She looked at him then. Not as an executive, not even as a colleague, as a woman who had been watching, quietly learning. "I think she said that for a long time I mistook control for clarity. But you," her voice caught slightly, "you taught me that. Stillness doesn't mean uncertainty. Sometimes it just means listening." Miguel didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You once asked me if I wanted to do more." She nodded. He looked around their small kitchen, the crooked cabinet, the light bulb that flickered every third evening, then at her, at the way her hands had relaxed, at the way she wasn't trying to fill the silence anymore. "I don't want more," he said. "I want real." She met his eyes, and this time she didn't fill the silence either. Later that night, after she left, Miguel tucked Camilla into bed. "Did you like the visit?" he asked. Camilla nodded. She smiled more tonight. "She's been learning how." "From you?" He chuckled. "Maybe a little from both of us." She pulled the blanket up to her chin. "Dad?" "Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen you this happy." Miguel paused, then knelt beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "It's not happiness, Mika. It's peace. And that took me a long time to earn." 2 days later, Camilla and Miguel stood before the community center auditorium, waiting for their names to be called. Parents and children filled the seats. Art projects lined the walls like windows into other worlds. The MC tapped the mic. "Next up, we have a joint entry from Camilla Alvarez and her father, Miguel Alvarez. Their piece is titled, 'What You Don't See.'" Camilla squeezed Miguel's hand. "Ready?" he whispered. "No," she grinned. "But let's do it anyway." They walked on stage. Camilla began. "This is a story about a janitor who used to be a professor and a girl who used to think she had to be loud to be seen." Laughter Light applause. Miguel continued. It's about what happens when words stop being weapons and start becoming bridges. They read their piece, short, simple, full of heart. A story about silence and truth, about loss and rediscovery, about how some people find the courage to speak and others find the courage to listen. When they finished, the room was still. Then the applause came, not thunderous, but warm, sustained, felt. Afterward, as they walked out under the soft glow of street lamps, Camilla said, "That was better than I expected." Miguel smiled. "Good things usually are." That night, as the city fell asleep around them, Miguel sat at his desk journal, open. He didn't write much, just one line. When words become feelings and feelings become actions, that's when a life begins to mean something. He underlined it once, then softly closed the book. 1 year later, the office on the top floor of Bionova had changed. The layout was the same clean lines, warm wood, tall windows that framed the city skyline like a painting, but the energy was different, quieter, more human. There was laughter in the hallways now, not forced, not nervous, but real. The kind that comes when people feel safe. And at the heart of it all sat Miguel Alvarez. His office was tucked at the end of the hallway behind a frosted glass door that bore no grandiose title, just a simple placarded linguistic integrity office. But on the inside of the desk drawer, tucked under a notepad and a worn leather journal, was a gift he hadn't yet mounted, a nameplate. Dr. Miguel Alvarez, Director of International Linguistics and Cultural Affairs. Beneath it, a handwritten note from Veronica. Your choice whether to use this. Either way, you are seen now. He ran a finger over the engraving sometimes. Not often, just enough to remind himself that recognition didn't need to be loud to be real. That afternoon, Camilla stopped by the office after school, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a stack of papers in hand. You're late, Miguel teased as she dropped onto the couch. You're early, she countered, smirking. He raised an eyebrow. Touché. She handed him the papers. Our story got published in the district journal. They want us to speak at next month's literacy event. Miguel scanned the pages, his voice softening as he read the opening line again. Not all heroes wear badges. Some just carry keys and keep the lights on after everyone else has gone home. He looked at her. You wrote that? I felt that Camilla replied more serious now. You lived it? He smiled. Maybe we both did. That evening, they walked to the community garden together, a weekly ritual now. Camilla watered the foxgloves and marigolds while Miguel pruned the wild mint creeping toward the tomato rows. It had become their place of peace, of growth, not just for plants, but for hearts long silent. As they worked in companionable quiet, Veronica arrived with a picnic basket and a folded blanket. You're late, Miguel called out. She grinned. She gets it from me. They laid the blanket near the peach tree and passed around sandwiches and fruit. Camilla sprawled on her stomach, sketching something while the adults sipped coffee from thermoses. Remember the first time we sat under this tree? Veronica asked. Miguel nodded. You brought files. I brought skepticism, she laughed. You also brought the best contract edits our team had ever seen. He looked at her quieter now. You saw me before I was ready to be seen. That mattered. Veronica met his gaze. You taught me to look. A long pause. Then she said, You ever going to hang that name? Plate? Miguel smiled. I like knowing it's there, but truth be told, I like earning it more. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Miguel watched Camilla chasing fireflies near the fence, her laughter lifting into the golden light. He turned to Veronica, his voice low. You know what? I've learned most this year. She leaned in. What? That healing doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like trust built slowly, quietly, one honest moment at a time. She nodded and Love Miguel glanced at her hand, then slowly reached for it. fingers interlaced. "No performance, no fear. Love," he said, "looks like showing up even when you have every reason to run." She squeezed his hand, and in that shared silence, everything unspoken was understood. Later that night, after Camilla had fallen asleep in the car ride home and Veronica had kissed Miguel on the cheek before heading upstairs, Miguel stood alone at the kitchen counter. He opened the drawer, pulled out the nameplate. He stared at it a long moment, then gently, reverently placed it on the bookshelf beside his old teaching certificate and Camilla's first published story. He didn't need the world to know, but he needed to know that he believed it now, that he had lived through the dark and chosen to return to the light, not for applause, but for legacy, for her, for them, for the quiet voice inside that had waited so patiently to be heard to those who've ever felt unseen. Your value does not diminish in silence. Your truth does not expire in shadow. And one day, when you least expect it, someone will look at you with eyes that finally see. And in that moment, everything will begin again. Miguel closed the journal, set it gently beside the nameplate, and turned off the light. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest truths, and sometimes the ones we overlook are the ones who save us. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know where are you watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how far stories like this can travel. And if you believe the world needs more stories of kindness, redemption, and quiet courage, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. Your support helps these stories reach someone who might need them today. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for spending your time here. Until next time, keep believing in the